Friday, Disney announced the information behind the new Tron attraction and Tiana's Bayou adventure. However, we know that Disney is running scared when it comes to these new attractions. They're not confident at all. In fact, they know that they're probably not as popular as they'd like you to believe. And we're going to prove that Disney knows that in this video right now. Explaining entertainment, keeping you ahead of the culture curve. That's what we do here each and every day. And we've got a slight break in the action. Yesterday, we brought out the big Star Wars news. We had the Renegade Online show, all kinds of news breaking in terms of Disney and their earnings report coming up. But we've got this day today that I thought it would be fun to look at the news that Disney they put it out at the end of Friday, and that's never a good sign when a company puts something out at that time slot. Coming back to the channel for the second time, the always positive, always wonderful Lorena Creole. Welcome back.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be back, and thank you for having me back.
Now, for those who don't know, Splash Mountain has been closed at Walt Disney World. And they are now in the process of deconstructing all the stuff that is Splash Mountain and replacing it with Tiana's Bayou Adventure. And so Disney put out this little press release, this little marketing campaign called Tiana's Foods, giving the backstory to Splash Mountain. Well, now Tiana's Bayou Adventure. And this will be for both Disney World and Disneyland, although the park in Tokyo will continue to have Splash Mountain with all the Brer characters. That is not changing. So let me read this story we've got, and then we'll discuss it. But as I read it, let me just say, I've been covering this now for, I guess a year. And when I mentioned that the Imagineers were going to base this ride on Avery Island, and then they hurriedly went to Louisiana to make it seem authentic, like they had visited this and done their research, even though that was after the decisions had been made. People thought it was crazy. People thought, "Oh, come on, Pro, you're off your rocker." Well, let's get into it. So, new storyline details revealed for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. At a young age, Tiana developed a deep passion for cooking and began to dream of one day owning her own business. That's the movie, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen it. That's The Princess and the Frog. Her father, James, taught her that good food brings folks together. One of the most exciting parts of Tiana's Bayou Adventure is that we're going to see where Tiana's life has taken her following the success of Tiana's Palace, a restaurant she had dreamed of owning and worked so hard to make come true. And boy, has Tiana been successful. Hang in there for this one. Walt Disney Imagineering, and that's Carmen Smith is the lady who's over this project, is creating an original next chapter story for Tiana. Within the attraction queue, guests will discover that she continues to grow her business with Tiana's Foods, an employee-owned cooperative. Interesting. Combining her talents with those of the local community, Tiana has transformed an aging salt mine and built a beloved brand. All right, an abandoned salt mine. Lorena, any thoughts so far as we go through this interesting story that doesn't at all sound like the movie?
I'm so underwhelmed right now.
Yes, that's well stated.
Speaking as someone with ancestry from New Orleans, I'm even more underwhelmed by this. Of all things, a salt mine.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this salt mine too, and the actual history behind it. Do you know the actual history behind the Avery Island Salt Dome?
Yes, I do. And
this is going to be good.
Avery Island.
Well, let's read the rest, and then we're going to explain to the audience what this is doing, because in my opinion, this is kind of insidious. And I don't really talk that way a whole lot, but in my opinion, what this is doing is way, way worse than what Splash Mountain was ever accused of doing. So we'll talk about it in a minute. The endeavor began when Tiana purchased the salt mine. Gosh, how much money does it take to buy a salt mine? That can't be a little. She's doing well. I'm not sure I would invest in a salt mine, but hey, you do you, Tiana. You're the new Tabasco. And the area surrounding the large salt dome it operated from. That's key there, by the way. There aren't that many salt domes. I don't know if it's not like everywhere in the continental United States you're driving by and you say, honey, look at the salt dome on the right side. That's because that's a pretty unique geographical feature. And it pretty much just says, hey, we're ripping off Avery Island. We're ripping off Tabasco because that's where Tabasco is made. With the help of her mother, Eudora, Naveen, Lewis, and fellow owners of the cooperative, Tiana revived the old salt mine and the surrounding land, growing a wide array of vegetables, herbs, and spices for her recipes. So she's not only owning a salt mine, a dilapidated salt mine, which historically was manned and worked by slaves. They're not including that in this description. But also, she's turned it into a little Eden, right? She's just turned it into paradise on earth with her vegetables, herbs, and spices. This multifaceted enterprise has turned the aging salt mine into a space that has come alive, complete with a boutique farm, and both a working and teaching kitchen. I love it. Tiana's Foods is where Tiana and her colleagues create all sorts of new products that they are bringing to the world, including a line of original hot sauces. Can you say marketing, Lorena? Can you say marketing? Can you say we're selling hot sauce in the little gift shop outside this former Splash Mountain?
That's exactly where I feel
That's
this
right.
is going. It's blatant.
They're ripping off the Pepper Palace.
Yeah.
They're gonna, and it's probably worse. They're probably gonna get the exact same hot sauces that you can buy anywhere in the world for like $5 a bottle. Take those labels off and put Tiana's Foods on it and charge like $25, $30 for a little bottle. So it's just, they're really something. Let's finish this one off. Tiana wants to give a big thanks to her family and friends and the entire community for all the support they've given her by throwing an amazing party during Mardi Gras season. When it turns out there's been a bit of a mix-up with the party preparations, Tiana invites us to meet her at Tiana's Foods to help with the missing ingredient for the party. It's probably love. When we arrive, we may see that Tiana spruced up the company's facilities with vibrant art from local artists. I'm telling you, you could not make this into a better parody. You couldn't. It's got every buzzword in here that you could want. Food for the party is being prepared, and beignets are being loaded into crates for the celebration. All kinds of preparations are underway for the journey into the Bayou with Tiana, along with her new and familiar friends from the animated film. Now, here's what people need to know.
Okay.
Picking up where that story left off. Okay, this is not The Little Mermaid. This isn't Scary Adventures with Snow White. This is the sequel. This is the sequel. And instead of Tiana, and the Princess and the Frog story, and she's a scrappy young lady trying to own her own restaurant, right? Rise up in society. This time, we're going to see what happens afterwards. And she owns an entire salt mine. Who in the world knows why that would come into the picture? But that's the sequel that we're going to get. And what that means is the crazy story I've been reporting now for a long time that they were not using the original soundtrack for the movie, which, by the way, would be the clear, obvious, blatantly, it's the only thing you should do is use the original soundtrack. They're not gonna, because this is all new. This is a new story. This is the sequel. So Tiana continues bringing people together with Tiana's Foods, another treasured meeting place to spend time together and celebrate a diverse community. Tiana is also working with cooperative members to teach gardening and cooking to children of all ages, and inspiring other women, but not men, to run successful businesses as the brand grows nationwide. So I'm trying to figure out if this is a log flume ride or if this is some sort of entrepreneurial equitable class in a liberal arts college. Which is it, Lorena? What are we riding in this thing?
It is definitely the second one. Let's talk about this thing, employee-owned cooperative.
Little socialism group on the island now.
Yeah, what's wrong with her owning her restaurant, or better yet,
It
owning
wasn't
a
good enough.
chain of restaurants? What was wrong with that? Now we have to do with this whole employee-owned cooperative. Just the socialist buzzword just drives
Is it not
me
just? Is this not the
nuts.
strangest backstory for any ride in any theme park you have ever heard? This is the most convoluted thing I've ever heard
So
for a
convoluted.
thrill ride.
It's not straightforward. You know, with the original Splash Mountain, it was a pretty straightforward yet beloved story. You got it. With this, they seem to be jumping through so many hoops and bending over so many different ways to deliver this quote unquote diverse theming. And the issue that I have with that is that anyone who has ever grown up in New Orleans, anyone who has ever had ancestry from New Orleans, which I do for centuries, that whole area has been diverse for centuries. The cuisine is from Spain, Africa, France, England. So many people have contributed to that cuisine. How come they couldn't go with that story?
So you bring up a fantastic point. And so I want to take a look at some of the responses that came into Disney for this. And then I want you and I to dive into the historical nature of what they're doing. And by that, I mean ahistorical. But let's take a look real quick at some of these responses, because I've looked through what people have said on Twitter in response. And by the way, the like to view ratio is less than 1% for this. I mean, the number of people who saw this and said, I'm actually not a fan, is very high. But here are some of the responses that I see. Ashley says, I'm sorry, I couldn't even tell which one was Tiana in this picture. Is she not the one in the middle? They should have stuck to the Princess and the Frog story, because this is not fit for a thrilling log flume adventure. Ashley's got some more responses there. We've got, but most people, this is by Dylan Fontaine, but most people don't want this retheme. Your customers voted 5-1 to keep Splash. Why don't you listen to your customers and sell them what they want? I'm sure a lot of people would love a Tiana attraction, but why not do it as its own ride and not create inherent resentment? Kate Fisher says, no, thanks, I don't want it. You just can keep going down. Derek says, sounds weird. Doesn't sound in line with the movie. It's like Living with the Land is being overlaid on Splash Mountain. That's a great one. Philosophicus, love that name, says, an employee-owned food cooperative and cultivating herbs and spices. Sounds riveting.
Yeah.
Michael D says, give me Dr. Facilier and throw this backstory in the trash. So, not quite, I think, what Disney was hoping for in terms of enthusiasm response, although they did dump this on a Friday evening, so maybe they knew, maybe somebody not associated with making this thing, but somebody in marketing said, this is a stinker. This is just, ew.
It just is. It's like when you want to bury a story, especially a news story, you drop it on a Friday, late Friday afternoon, Friday evening, when people aren't paying attention. That's usually when you bury stuff, or stuff that you don't really care about.
Right.
Because
Let
there
it die
wasn't
over the
much
weekend.
fanfare. Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about the ahistorical nature of this attraction and why it is offensive on many levels. So I get that some people thought that Splash Mountain was offensive. We're not really going to talk about that here, because, I mean, that would be an entirely other video. And I've already done videos on this topic quite a bit. But let's get into why this is just really bad. First of all, they based this on Avery Island, which is where Tabasco is made. Avery Island is a real place. Avery Island has a real history. Avery Island was worked and mined and farmed by real slaves who were real people. They are there buried really on Avery Island. And in my opinion, when you take something like this, something that's a real historical place with a very significant history, we'll talk more about why it's so significant in just a moment. But when you take a real place like this, and then you retcon the history for your little cartoon character ride, I think that is dramatically offensive. So what do you think? Is this offensive, you think, or is this part of the course maybe?
Part of the course for Disney, because number one, they gave us this retheme of Splash Mountain that no one particularly asked for. So I don't know what's more insulting, the fact that these quote unquote historians or whoever went down there and thought this was a good idea, or Disney just thinking that no one's going to go and do the research and find out about this place. It's extremely offensive to me that you go with this thing of Splash Mountain was problematic, whatever, but yet you go and base this new ride of Tiana's based on what happened with actual slaves.
Right, and then ride over these real people.
Right over it and just kind of
turn
like,
it into a flume ride.
It's not a big deal. We're just going to make it into, a flume ride. It sounds to me like they're trying to rewrite history.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, that's not it. People who are from that area will know exactly what that is. We know what Avery Island is. We know what the history of Avery Island is. But yet it's insulting. And just shows that these people didn't do any real research.
You know how they got stuck in this, right?
No.
They needed something. Okay, so when they made this decision with this blue sky proposal that they put out in the public and promised, with no plan for it whatsoever on what they're actually going to do, they have a character based in Louisiana, completely flat state. Much of the state is below sea level.
Yes.
But they've now attached this character who lives in Louisiana to an attraction which itself is taller than any point in Louisiana. So they attach this ride, Splash Mountain. Okay, well, what do you do if you've got to make a mountain into a Louisiana attraction? So they went down there, just blah 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 blah, just clueless as to what they're doing, and they realized, oh wait, salt domes. There's a salt dome down there. We can do a salt dome. Oh, and that'll fix the laughing place scene because they go down and they mine the salt. Happy mining the salt in the little salt dome. Oh, this will be so great. Let's go down there. Let's take a trip. And we'll get some local artists and we'll make it look good. That's what they did. That's the level of stupid we're dealing with right now. Yeah, that's my face exactly.
This is why I put the word historian in quotes. No one who did any real research would think, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's base a flume ride, based on a place that had actual slaves.
Yes, actual slaves mining the salt. This is so bad.
Everyone knows really the euphemism for a salt mine is someplace you really don't want to work. I mean, even on that level, you couldn't figure that out. No.
It gets worse. It gets worse. So Avery Island, and this is something that I learned recently. I did not know this, but Avery Island is also the location where the spiritual hymnals, the spiritual hymns that enslaved peoples were singing in North America. Avery Island is where they actually went and tried to record those. So they had to do research and it's the original owner of Tabasco that allowed this to happen, but allowed researchers to come in of that day. They went into the church that was there on Avery Island, and they had the slaves or the former slaves. I think this was during Reconstruction, but they had the former slaves sing their spiritual hymns that they sang all the time in their worship services. And so all of these hymns that were saved, that were recorded down so that now we can still understand what was being sung and what the music was, what the notes were. All of that happened on Avery Island. So it's a major historical place when it comes to Black history, when it comes to the history of enslaved peoples. This is a huge historically important location. And now Disney is using this. I mean, it's like taking Gettysburg and turning it into a fun little roller coaster. It's like, I mean, it's just not a good idea whatsoever at all. Zero.
It really isn't. But then again, it just shows yet again Disney isn't about real diversity at all. True diversity and respecting Black culture. With this, it's just like, yeah, we just want something, slap a label on it, make merchandise
And then
off of
slap
it.
ourselves on the back. That's what
Yeah,
they
and
that's what
say,
they want to do
"Hey,
too.
didn't we do such a good thing here? The other ride was problematic. See, this is great. So now we have, Tiana and her employee-owned cooperative to teach business skills to
So
people."
bad. It's so
Oh my
bad.
God. I'm like, how many businesses have been around in New Orleans, which are plenty, even including, Meemaw, who has, a hole in the wall restaurant in the back of her house full of people because she makes the best food. That's her business.
Now, Lorena, here's where I think it's also offensive on a completely different domain. So this is set in the 1920s.
Hmm.
And we know that in the original movie, it's a big deal that Tiana manages in that time, in that place, to get her own restaurant. And that's a point of emphasis in the movie, that her doing that is very significant. Now, this ride, in just a few years following, because we've seen the pictures, Tiana's still a young lady. They want her to look just like she did in The Princess and the Frog, minus a costume change because she can't wear the costume. Princesses are not in vogue right now. But in just a few years, she goes from owning a restaurant, very hard to do, to having the money to own an entire mining operation and own a huge amount of land for a salt mine. Now, what I find to be not okay about this is that she's from the 1920s in the South in New Orleans.
Hmm.
I find that this, in my opinion, goes back in history and it sort of paints over the difficulties that women, and particularly women of color, would have had in succeeding in this way. It sort of, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they'll tackle that. Maybe they'll deal with the racism of the South in the 1920s, right? But I can't imagine they'll do that. But maybe they will. But this seems to be making light of just how difficult it was for real people, real women of color to own their own businesses, to become entrepreneurs. And this cartoon character is doing something that might have seemed very impossible to many people who would have aspired to do something similar.
Now, see, that was one of the issues that I had with the original Princess and the Frog movie. Yes, it is entertainment, so to speak, but not realistic for that time of the 1920s in New Orleans, not realistic for that time in the Deep South. That was during Jim Crow. So you didn't see like segregated buses. You didn't see the just, just how hard it was for women, for Black women to basically own their own businesses. They kind of skated over that whole thing. Again, it's a movie for kids. I understand that you don't want to, you don't want to touch that.
This takes it to a new level.
It does. It does. It's more from just a movie to entertain kids to now you have this ride with an extremely problematic foundation. And you've got a historical context here that isn't being explained very
It
well.
seems like they're taking real history with real slaves in a real geographical location, and they're painting over it with Disneyfication.
Oh, they totally are.
So,
They completely are.
in my opinion, this is far worse than anything that Splash Mountain ever did. Way, way worse. And I don't think Splash Mountain did anything wrong, period. So just a heads up on that. All right. So next up, I want to talk about Tron because this was also part of the information dump that Disney Parks did on Friday
Mhm.
evening. And first of all, tell me, what are your thoughts on Tron? Are you excited about it? Is it a big attraction in your opinion for Magic Kingdom, or is it in some way also flawed?
Well, I was excited for it when it was announced, like, what, 5 years
That's
ago?
right.
I was excited when I thought it would open with the 50th. I mean, that was one of my plans. It's like, okay, it's gonna be open, the 50th, but it didn't. So it's anticlimactic, right now. It's a ride that you can see already. It's in Shanghai. So they're bringing it here to Walt Disney World. So I would say while it's cool to see, it's so anticlimactic to me because in contrast, Universal Orlando had the worst kept secret, which was the Velocicoaster. They built that thing and had it running.
Well,
Tron's
you know, the
still up and running.
the other thing is that Tron has taken longer to build than Epcot, the entire theme park of Epcot. So this is something. Now, what happened Friday evening that's so amazing is that we all know that Tron is a heavily criticized attraction in Shanghai for being very, very short. And so,
Hmm.
really, the ride is about a minute long, basically. Um, and it's a fantastic 1 minute. I mean, it
Mhm.
really is, but it should be more. And Disney had the opportunity when they were putting this in Disney World to
Mhm.
make it be longer. They have all the land they need. They could have added more track, more stuff, but for budgetary reasons, they decided not to. And by the way, this is something that was greenlit under Iger when he was the CEO before, because remember, it's been under construction for 6 years.
Yes.
So when Disney released the video of Tron, they, I guess, felt the need to hide how short it is. So they basically presented it as, well, we're not going to show you the entire thing. You've got to ride it in order to see it. They cut out 10 seconds. They're clearly trying to show people that the ride is way longer, when in fact it's 60 seconds. They showed you 50 seconds of it, and they didn't show you anything that's going to just blow your mind in those missing 10 seconds. And so they got called out on that on YouTube with people, I guess, now realizing, oh, this is really, really short. People who don't pay attention to Shanghai.
Mhm.
So, Lorena, when we get to Tron, because it's essentially now it's going to be the replacement for Splash Mountain in terms of eating the crowds, right? Splash
Mhm.
Mountain very efficient at that. Tron not quite so much, but it'll be good at moving crowds. But how do you think people are going to react when they have an hour and a half or 2 hour wait, and when they're paying large amounts of money to ride this attraction, and it's 60 seconds long?
They're not going to react very, very well. Not well at all. Let's contrast this with Flight of Passage over in the Animal Kingdom.
Oh,
That's
that's a great
based
one to
on
compare to.
Yes, and that is based on Avatar. I've waited an hour and a half, I would say, the longest. Some people have waited longer to get on that attraction between the queue, between the pre-show and then the actual show is a heck of a lot longer than 3 minutes.
Oh
It's
yeah,
quite
definitely.
extensive. I want to say probably from strapping in to done, probably about closer to 5 by the time it's done. And it's so absolutely worth it. When people find out that you're waiting in, well, first of all, fighting to get a virtual queue reservation, number one, because they're
Right, and then
opening
paying if you
virtual queue for
can't,
this.
because that's really the
Yes.
idea.
And then paying for the lightning lane, when they can't. And I wouldn't be surprised if they charge like $20, a
Oh
pop
yeah,
for that.
definitely.
And then to find out it's a minute, I don't see this going over well. There's nothing, I mean, the lights look really cool and everything, but I've seen the ride vehicle testing. It's not that fast. It's just
I
it's not that fast. It's not really a thrill.
Lorena,
So
you bring up a fantastic point when you brought up the lights. So this is something that was brought to my attention by somebody who works in management at Disney. And so they sent me a little message
mhm,
letting me know that there's a real issue here. And the real issue is that most attractions, it doesn't matter when you ride the ride. There are a few attractions that it does matter when you ride the ride. So the example I have is Big Thunder Mountain Railroad.
mhm,
When you ride that in the day, it's a completely different experience than in the night, but they're both good
absolutely.
experiences. In the
Mhm,
day, It feels very authentically Western. At night, it's sort of like a dreamlike kind of state, right? It's like an impressionist version of the West. You've got all the beautiful lights shining on the mesas,
Mm-hmm.
and there is the issue of, can you ride Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at the same time as the fireworks are going off? That's a really cool experience.
Yeah.
Okay. But Tron is a new category of ride at Disney World. And the reason for that is, if you ride Tron at night, you have a significantly better experience than in the day. Because when you ride at night, you go through the entire canopy with all of that lighting that makes it look like you're flying through Tron.
Mm-hmm.
When you ride it in any other hour, right, when there's daylight, it looks like you're riding through a plastic canopy. And so your ride experience is dramatically better when the sun goes down. Now, what that means is that as soon as people figure out, and this is what management, one of the managers sent me, this is their real worry.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is, and let me say this before I go in, the ride at Shanghai was developed before reservations were set up. Okay, so things weren't all reservation centered and based.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're in an era at Disney parks where everything is on your little, you hold your phone in front of your face and make your reservations all day.
Mm-hmm.
Once people figure out that there's a dramatically better ride experience, 7 p.m. and later, let's say, they're all going to want those reservations. And so you're going to have a ride that is much more coveted for a very few hours. And you're going to have people who are frustrated when they ride it. Let's say it's somebody who doesn't know anything in the parks. They ride it at 10 a.m. They come back later and they go, oh my gosh, we paid $150 for our family to ride that. It's so much better at night. We got ripped off. So that's a worry that management has now. Do you think that's a legit thing?
I think it's extremely legit. From as long as I've been watching this ride come together, during the day, there's nothing remarkable about it. It's like you're saying, it's like a plastic canopy and, you got the trains running. There's nothing that stands out. The only people who actually get to see any kind of effect is if you're on the people mover and you see, the LEDs on the ride vehicles. That's it. At night, that canopy is lit up. It looks amazing. That's part of the draw, because that actually really does make you feel like you're in the film. There's no break between, the show building and how dark it is in the show building with that, and then the lights on the outside. But if you're riding during the day, there is all of that light show that's in the ride building, and then you're outside and it's the sun, and it just breaks the immersion. So I really do think that is a very real thing. You're going to have people clamoring to ride that ride in the evening. And
you're going to have very long lines at closing that are going to drive cast members nuts. Yep, they're going to be up. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to have to cap it, because otherwise you're going to have people lining up for a 2-hour wait at closing. Good
which
luck
is
with
probably
that
which is probably why they're somehow going to manipulate this whole lightning lane and virtual queue. Yeah.
All right, well, let's end this on a happy note. Tell me some things that you've enjoyed lately at Walt Disney World, because I know you go quite often. So in spite of this stuff, we know, I dislike Splash Mountain being dismantled immensely, and I dislike what they're putting there. And I think the Tron thing is foolish that it took this long, and that they didn't add a second show building or an extension that would handle a longer track to make this more worthwhile. Would have been very small in the grand scheme of things for expenditures. However, Disney World is still a fantastic place for families to go who can afford it. What are some great things that you've been enjoying lately?
Oh, well, number one, the Walt Disney World Railroad is back.
That's right.
I would ride that as a kid. It was just so much fun to ride. You get like a different experience with going around, around the park. The trains look nice and refreshed with paint and everything, and it's just wonderful. So I'm definitely enjoying that. Let's see, what else am I enjoying? Oh, always enjoying Big Top Big Top Souvenirs, which is over in Storybook Circus, which I
Okay.
love the
I was
theming
not
there.
expecting that. Why do you like Big Top Souvenirs?
Well, the reason why
There's something
is
to this.
yes, there is. I'm a fan of the Dumbo movie, have been since I was a little kid. Love the circus scene. When you walk into Big Top Souvenirs, it is literally a circus Big Top that you walk into. They've got like, the little cars that keep the animals in. Of course, they have merchandise and stuff in there, but they have that. There's circus music playing. The place smells like the great treats you get at the circus, like the caramel popcorn, peanuts. They have all kinds of disrespectful desserts there. It's like the Main Street Bakery used to be before it got corporatized by M&M Mars. Just with that and the souvenirs, if you've got families, number one, it's cool inside. Two, there's tables and things where you can sit down and just kind of de-stress, and it's just a fun atmosphere with great snacks to get. Slushies are absolutely flipping amazing. The Powerade slushie is my favorite. It's just a great respite, and the theming is so nice. So I love that place. That's a place that every time I go to the Magic Kingdom, I of course have to drop into.
Well, Lorena, that is why people should be subscribing to your channel. They should be watching your content, because in all the time that I have ever asked anybody to tell me some of the things they're enjoying at Disney World, nobody has ever told me Big Top Souvenirs. And yet you have this fantastic reason, this story behind why you love it so much. And it's one of those things that I bet the majority of guests never even go inside. So what a great tip.
Welcome.
Now, a nice little thing about Big Top Souvenirs, for those of you who are interested, if you want to see something cool, Imagineering related, let's hope they leave it up here after I tell this. But there is a large, it looks like a cardboard cutout. It's nicer than that, but there's a large silhouette painted of Big Bad Pete, right? Of the Pete character that is always Mickey Mouse's villain in the early cartoons, and later on is one of the characters in Goof Troop. But Pete, that cutout, if you'll walk behind it, it's okay. You can walk behind it. You're not in an area that's not allowed. But if you'll walk behind it and look, you will see that Imagineering had all of the parts of that. They have all the instructions written back there for when the construction crews put it together. And so you can actually see what it looks like when the construction crews are putting together all of this theming, because for whatever reason, they didn't cover that. So walk behind it in the space between it and the tent, and you'll be able to look and see all the instructions that exist when those pieces of theming arrive at the theme parks.
Oh, wow. Thank you for telling me that. I'm going to definitely
try this now, aren't you?
Yeah, I sure am.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today and giving us your thoughts on Tiana's Bayou Adventure, Tron, and the souvenirs over in Storybook Circus. It's a pleasure to have you on every time, and I'm sure we'll do it again. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you click like, share, subscribe, and stick it to those algorithms by clicking that little notification bell. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.